Alright, CNT120, we are working on our Chapter 6 lab. I downloaded a copy of the lab directions here and I have it ready to go. I've also downloaded a copy of the packet tracer file for this lab and I have this launched and ready to go as well. So what we're going to do in this lab is we actually have a little bit different setup this time. We have kind of simulating a site, maybe a branch of a company or a site of a company here. We actually have some desktop PCs, IP phones connecting into a router, and then this is connecting over to this equipment here that's kind of acting as the ISP. This is kind of like a little fake ISP I created over here for you. We end up using a scenario like this a bunch for 125 or future CNT classes. So we basically have a site over here that we have some phones and desktops already connected, and we want to add in some wireless capability to this existing network. So to start off with, let's take a look at what's here already. I actually want to look at the switch config and the router config to see what's already in place. So we're going to kind of spy into some of the network configuration that's been done already. So I'm going to click on the switch that's here, slide this over, and I'm going to, this is actually the physical switch itself. I'm going to click on the CLI tab. That's your command line interface. I'm going to hit enter here a couple times, and let me make my screen a little bit bigger, or my font a little bit bigger. Let's go to font. I'm going to go here to, let's try at least 12. And now hopefully this will be a little bit larger to see. There we go. That's a little bit larger for you to see. Okay, good. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to type the command enable or ENA. Oops. Hopes if I type correctly there. There we go. So let's do enable or ENA, one of the two. We change to the admin mode here, and I'm going to issue what's called the show run. I'm going to issue a command called show run. This shows the running configuration of the switch. And when I want to look at it, what is already configured here, I'm going to hit the enter key a couple times, and what I see is under my switch ports, fast Ethernet 1 or port 1, port 2, port 3, port 4, I start seeing this. This switch is configured that it's able to accept connection from a PC as well as the word voice there, phone. So these first handful of switch ports are configured to allow PCs and phones to connect, which is kind of neat. This is a configuration we do in 125 when we do our IP phone labs, our IP phone configuration. So I'm going to hit the space bar a couple times. You'll notice that that is done for the first 20 ports here. We then see the next couple ports are configured to be accessing a VLAN 30. This is now for the wireless users, or wireless access points. We go a little bit further and we now have a trunk port. This is the connection that goes to the router. That's the connection there that goes to the router. We have an IP address on the switch, and that's about it. So we have what are called some VLANs on here that allows these phones and PCs to exist together on the same port, but the switch is going to keep their traffic separated. It's going to keep them logically separated right here at this level, at this layer 2 level. That's what that's going to do. It's really nifty. It's pretty neat. Let's take a look now at the router config. So I'm going to click on the router. Again, this is what the router looks like for real. I'm going to do the CLI tab again. I'm going to hit the enter key a couple times and do enable or ENA, one of the two. And I'm going to do another show run. Let's look at the configuration that's on this guy. Again, I'll make this a little bit larger so we can see a little bit more. I'm going to hit the enter key a couple times here. What I see is all of this is the DHCP configuration. This router is configured to hand out IP addressing via DHCP for the PCs, a different group of numbers for the phones, and an even different group of numbers for the wireless devices. So we have this actually configured to hand out 3 different subnets, is what they're called, of addresses to the desktop computers, the phones, and the Wi-Fi users. So now the router, the switch was keeping them separated here at layer 2, if you will, the phones and the PCs and the access points. The router is now going to keep them separated at layer 3 with different IP schemes for each of those populations, which is pretty slick. I'm going to keep going. As I go down through, I'll notice that I have a bunch of configuration for my interfaces. These are to correspond to each of those VLANs that are on the switch. Here's the configuration on the router for VLAN 10 for the PCs. Here's the configuration for VLAN 20 for the phones. And here's the configuration for VLAN 30 for the wireless users. So we have a bunch of configuration there to keep them separate. And then we also have down here some NAT configuration, network address translation configuration. This is going to take any of the addressing we're using inside here and translate it, network address translate it, to get to the ISP. That's what that's going to do. So there's a bunch of configuration going on in the switch and router already to make all of this connection for this site be able to function and get to the ISP over here. So we have a bunch of stuff in place. We have enough in place that we're going to be able to add the wireless in to the existing structure that's already here. That's going to be the function. That's going to be the goal of what we're doing. Okay, so now let's keep looking. I want to look at the IP addresses for the PCs, the phones, and see what we got going on. So I'm going to go to the PC here. Let's go to the desktop. Once we're on the desktop, let's look at the command prompt and ipconfig all. So I'm going to do ipconfig config/all. There we go. And I'll see it's getting a 192.168.32.12, 32.1 the gateway, that's the router. And then DNS, it's passing to 10.10.10.2, which is actually the address of a DNS server that's over here. That's what that is. So our PCs have a dynamic address from the router. Cool beans. Let's take a look at the phones that are here. Okay, I'm going to hover my pointer over one of the phones that's here. If I look down there next to VLAN 20, I'll see that it has a 192.168.64.11. So the PC was 32 something. The phones are 64 something. Yes, these are in different subnets. These are in different logical layer 3 networks, if you will. That's what all the configuration here on the switch and the router is doing. They're keeping these separated. If I hold it over the other phone over here, I'll see it's 64.12. Okay? So they now have a valid IP as well. On my PC, I'm going to go back to my PC, or I can go to this one. It really doesn't matter at this point. I'll go over to this one now. I'll go to the desktop, and I want to look at, again, the command prompt, and I want to try to ping 10.10.10.3, which is the web server over there. So let's go to command prompt here, ipconfig, make sure we know what it's getting. It's a 32.11, good deal. Let's try to ping now 10.10.10.3, which should be the web server over at the ISP side of my network. The first one or two might time out until it finds its way. That's okay. But the rest should be successful then. So it looks like we had 2 timeout, but the rest, I'm going to repeat that, and now I should have like 4 successful, which is good. We have connectivity to that web server over there. Let's do a trace route now to the 10.10.10.3. And I now get to the router, to the ISP, and then over to that web server. So we have a complete path over there. Cool. I'm now going to open my web browser, and let's try to browse to that website, cnt.org over there. www.cnt.org. And I should be able to open the website that's on there, the web page that's on there. There we go. 120 Wireless Networking Lab. There we go. Yay. Okay. So we have the whole infrastructure up and working. And really all of this configuration of the switch and router, this is stuff we do in CNT125, the next level networking class. If you're a networking major or a security major, you'll end up taking CNT125 and learning how to do all of this configuration. For the rest of you, I at least wanted you to see that there is existing config here to make all of this work, and we're not going to add the wireless into it and have this function in the network as well. Okay, so let's move on now to getting the access point connected and configured in the network. Alright, my switch had existing config here, so I need to make sure when I plug the access point in, we need to make sure when we plug this access point in that we're actually plugging into one of the ports that's configured for wireless, in this case Fast Ethernet 21. So I'm going to connect a copper straight through cable. So I'll go to my connections tool, copper straight through cable. I'm going to connect from the access point. There is only one port to use there. I'm going to drag it over to the switch over here, click on the switch, and I want to make sure I go to port 21. 21 and 22 were configured for VLAN 30. And if I hold my pointer over the switch, I'll see down there next to the port 21, you'll see the word up on and then VLAN 30. We want to make sure this is in a VLAN 30 port. That was the port that was configured and allocated for the wireless users. So that is one of our ports. We're going to let that settle here in just a second. While that does, let's look at the physical closet. So let's go to the physical side over here. We'll go to our home city, corporate office. We're going to go to the main closet here. and I see my access point down there, and I should see, let me zoom in just a little bit, scroll down, there's my access point. I should see my access point cabling into my switch. I should see that down there in the port 21, and that is that right there. That's that cable there. It's showing it. It's literally showing it coming out from the network into this guy here. But that is my access point going into that port 21 there. So I'll go back out here. I'll go back out to my logical. If I want to, I might want to do a quick save before I go too much further. I will do a done or working. That way I know that's my working file. Okay, that way I'm saving my progress as I go here. Okay, so I now have that connected in. Let's get the access point configured. So to configure this guy, I'm going to click on him. I'll slide him over here. I'm going to go to the config tab. You notice there's only one port there. That's the port we have plugged in. We're going to go to over here on the left of the port 0 is basically the connection into the switch. We're going to go to the port 1 side. It's kind of a weird way to do it, but this is where we configure in our wireless settings. So we're going to here, let's give it an SSID of Wi-Fi users. Now this matters, syntax matters here. So I'm doing capital W, small I, capital F, small I, and then capital U, users. There we go. We'll leave the channel at 6, that's fine. Down here, range, we'll dial that back to 150 meters, so it doesn't have to be such a large radius. Let's do WPA2 pre-shared key, and we'll use a nice secure password here of password 1. And again, syntax here matters too. So Mr. Brown has to make sure he's not doing a typo, which I did have in there. And we'll leave the encryption at AES. Okay, so there's my basic wireless settings on my access point. I will close that. This now has the settings on that we are going to use on these devices to connect to the access point. So my wireless has been added in the network, and I have the basic settings on here. When I come back in the next podcast, I can start connecting my devices into the network.